Ever scrolling through your tech news and think, whoa, how'd they even come up with that? Like, did someone just wake up with that idea? I'm going to talk about those big tech leaps that seem to appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, those overnight successes, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. They're usually years, sometimes decades in the making.
Like a swan, all grace on the surface, but paddling like crazy underneath.
And today, we're diving deep into that hidden effort. We're going behind the scenes of innovation, using some really insightful thoughts from, well, who better than Steve Jobs?
Right. The man knew a thing or two about shaking up the tech world.
He did. And he had some pretty specific ideas about how those big leaps happen. And it's not all about lone geniuses in garages.
It's way more interesting than that. Timing, convergence, recognizing those moments when a field is ripe for change, it's all connected.
We're dissecting two of his big ideas today. Convergence of technologies and those exciting but kind of mysterious windows of opportunity. What do those even mean? More importantly, how can we learn to spot them? Like, can anyone do it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But let's start with Jobs' take on timing. Because that's really at the heart of his thinking, wouldn't you say?
It's like that saying, being early in business is the same as being wrong.
Brutal, but often true. And Jobs, he really emphasizes this idea that innovation isn't just about having a brilliant idea.
Okay, so it's not all about that light bulb moment. It takes more than just a great idea.
Way more. It's about the right ingredients coming together at the right time.
Okay, so let's break down those ingredients. Jobs talks about this convergence idea. Well, what's the deal with that?
It's like, imagine you're making a cake. You need the flour, the sugar, the eggs, all those things exist on their own, right?
Sure.
But to get that delicious cake, they need to come together in the right way at the right time. You can't bake a cake with just flour.
Right. Doesn't work that way.
Exactly. And it's the same with big technological leaps. Jobs talks about technologies from fairly diverse places needing to merge to create what he calls a quantum leap forward.
So it's not just one invention. It's more like a bunch of different things suddenly working together.
Precisely. It's like pieces of a puzzle, each one important, but only revealing the full picture when they're connected.
Can you give us an example of that? Like, what's a good example of this convergence thing in action?
Oh, well, look no further than the smartphone in your pocket. It combines the internet, GPS, touchscreens, all these technologies that existed independently for years, even decades in some form.
They weren't new.
Exactly. But when they were combined, it wasn't just adding things together, it created something completely new and revolutionary.
It's like 1 plus 1 suddenly equals 10.
Precisely. It's exponential, not just additive.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And, it makes me think about the printing press. It wasn't just Gutenberg's genius, right?
Right. He didn't invent paper or ink or the concept of a press.
Exactly. He brought together papermaking, ink, and this new press design.
Yeah.
All these existing ideas converged, and BAM information sharing was transformed forever.
The perfect example of how powerful convergence can be. But here's the tricky part. These moments of convergence, they're not always obvious in real time. Jobs talks about planets aligning, like he had some sixth sense for when the time was right.
So how do we learn to recognize those signs?
Yeah.
How can we get better at spotting those windows of opportunity he keeps talking about? Because let's be honest, they don't come with big neon signs, do they?
No, they definitely don't, but there are signals. One thing Jobs hints at is this idea of seemingly unrelated fields suddenly bumping into the same problems.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that look like?
Imagine for a moment biologists grappling with massive data sets, right? They're trying to make sense of all this genetic information.
Right, huge amounts of data.
And suddenly their work starts overlapping with computer scientists who are developing AI algorithms for data analysis.
Huh. So solutions in one field can unlock possibilities in another.
Exactly. Or think about something like battery technology. For years, we've been hitting limitations with how much energy we can store in a small space.
Which holds back so many other things.
Exactly. But then some new material or technique emerges, and suddenly what was impossible last year is the breakthrough of this year. That's a window cracking open.
So the window opens, the timing seems right. But Jobs is very clear that even then, it still takes time, serious time, to turn that potential into something real. He mentions a 5-year gap on average between spotting a window and a product being ready for the world.
And that's assuming everything goes smoothly, which it rarely does.
Right, building the future is messy. But it's a good reminder that even with perfect timing, innovation still takes hard work and dedication.
Absolutely. Inspiration is great, but perspiration is what gets it done.
So let's use a real-world example here. Let's talk about Apple. How did they go from spotting a window to creating iconic products like the Apple II and then later the Mac within that 5-year time frame?
It's a great example of both recognizing the moment and having the skills to capitalize on it.
So break it down for us. What was happening in the tech world when Apple was first starting out?
Well, in the 70s, personal computing was just emerging as a concept. People were starting to realize that computers weren't just these massive machines for governments and corporations.
Right. The idea of a personal computer was pretty radical.
Exactly. But at the same time, microprocessors, the brains of a computer, were becoming smaller, more powerful, and importantly, cheaper.
So the building blocks were becoming more accessible.
Yes. Then, as you move into the 80s, you have the development of graphical user interfaces, GUIs, making computers way more user-friendly.
So no more typing in endless lines of code just to do basic stuff.
Exactly. So you have this convergence of more accessible computing power, easier ways to interact with computers, and a growing desire for personal technology.
And Jobs and his team at Apple, they were able to ride that wave. They saw that window opening and had the skills to actually build something amazing for it.
It's a great example of what Jobs was talking about. The right ideas at the right time, but then backed by the talent and the sheer will to make it happen.
But Jobs also mentions that sometimes you have to push, that sometimes you see the potential, but the timing isn't perfect. The technology might not be quite there yet. He talks about pushing the window open rather than waiting for it to swing wide on its own.
And that's where it gets really interesting and really tricky, because that's the balance every innovator has to find the tension between vision and practicality.
Right, because being too early can be brutal for a new idea. You could end up being a cautionary tale instead of a success story.
Exactly. Think about Google Glass, for example, a super cool concept, ahead of its time in a lot of ways, but maybe society wasn't ready for face computers.
I think they were right about the future, but maybe just a bit too early.
Precisely. The technology was impressive, the vision was there, but the timing was off.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, knowing when to push and when to be patient.
And that's different for every innovation, for every inventor. Some people are known for being ahead of their time, others for perfecting existing ideas. There's no right or wrong answer there, which is what makes it so fascinating to think about.
So bringing it back to what we've talked about today, it seems like it's not just about spotting the window of opportunity, but knowing how to approach it, how to use it.
Yes. Push too soon and your idea falls flat. Wait too long and someone else capitalizes on the opportunity.
Tough choices. Well, we covered a lot of ground today, from convergence to windows of opportunity. It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's how the world changes, right? It's how we go from clunky computers to sleek smartphones, from horse-drawn carriages to self-driving cars.
Right. And what I'm taking away from all of this, from Steve Jobs' insights, is that real lasting breakthroughs are often about timing and tenacity. Recognizing the right moment, that's key. But then having the grit, the determination to see it through, even when it gets tough, that's what separates the dreamers from the doers.
I like that. Dreamers and doers. Because you need both to change the world.
So here's a thought for everyone listening, something to chew on. What windows might be opening up right now in your world? What converging trends are you seeing in your job, your hobbies, your life? Because you never know, it might just be the start of something incredible.
The next big thing.
Maybe so.